Hey everybody, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at Upgrade. This is a 5-cost action card from Intrigue, and it says +1 card, +1 action, trash a card from your hand, gain a card costing exactly 1 more than it. So when you first look at Upgrade, it might immediately give you ideas about Remodel and invoke some comparisons. So Remodel from the base game is trashing a card from your hand, and it's gaining you another one that can be more expensive. Well, Upgrade is very, very different from Remodel in a whole number of ways. I'd say it's completely different in how you use it compared to Remodel. So one of the things that makes Remodel very good is the way that it can gain you provinces. This is sort of where its real power lies, and while it has a bunch of uses, and such as getting rid of your earlier states and turning them into much more useful cards, a lot of the time when Remodel's really good on a board, it's because you're using it to gain the victory cards at the end of the game, and particularly the provinces. Not many cards out there can gain you provinces in the way that Remodel can. Now, Upgrade cannot do this. There is an exception to this. If there are 7-cost cards, then Upgrade can do this, but there aren't actually very many 7-cost cards across all of Dominion. So Upgrade sort of cannot really fill the same niche as Remodel a lot of the time. So it's instead doing things that Remodel cannot, and that's really what we're going to look at. So first of all, let's isolate these last 2 sentences from the card. Trash a card from your hand, gain 1 costing exactly 1 more than it. And let's take a much closer look at this. So the main sort of feel of Upgrade and sort of what it's trying to get you to do when you're looking at the card is this whole trashing your non-junk cards and using it to gain other ones. So you're going to look at a card that's like 3 or 4 cost or 5, and you're going to trash it and you're going to swap it for one that's a little bit more expensive. So when we talked in the Remodel video, one of the big problems that you have around this is that typically when you are looking to add cards to your deck throughout the game, you kind of want to add in the cards that are doing the most for you and the ones that you want the most. So this immediately gets you to ask questions about how good is trashing these and swapping them for others, right? Upgrade is a lot less flexible as well with this gaining compared to Remodels, because Remodel's getting you a card potentially up to 2 more, whereas Upgrade can only get you cards that cost exactly 1 more than it, so you've got way less options when you do it. And also, this sort of improvement is a lot slower than Upgrade. So because the maximum sort of upgrade it can give you is only half as much extra value as Remodel, it is, only very, very slowly improving your deck. When you think about a strategy that uses Remodel a lot, there was something I talked in my Remodel video called Turbo Remodel, and it's not really a strategy because it's hard to just make a deck where all you're doing is remodeling stuff over and over. And Upgrade is sort of even worse in this regard because it's just so slow at improving the value of your cards. You have to draw and play the Upgrade so many times to actually start getting cards that are meaningfully more expensive and more powerful than you do compared to Remodel. So this, again, sort of feels like a point that's not in Upgrade's favour. Like, it makes it feel so much worse than Remodel at doing this. However, when you look at the cards that you have in your deck and you think, what do I want to try and upgrade? The fact that Upgrade costs 5 means that it's usually going to be a pretty tempting target. When you have a deck that's got a lot of different cards in it and you've got a couple of upgrades, you find a lot of the time that your best target to actually upgrade into something else tends to be the upgrades themselves, because they're not cards that you necessarily want to play a lot, and it's quite expensive. And sometimes you get cards that cost 6 that you want a lot of, like Border Village or Gold. Even though it's not super great, sometimes you want to get a lot of payload, and you might think to yourself, well, maybe I can be upgrading upgrades and turning it into gold. And you can. But sort of the main reason why you're going to be doing this with Upgrade and actually making use of its pretty weak upgrading effect, is to try and make other things better. So sometimes you have cards like gainers, like Workshop, and it gets you these 4-cost cards, but you actually want 5-cost cards. Well, what you can do is you can gain the cards with Workshop, and you can then turn them into 5s. So if you had something which needed a lot of 5-cost cards, like, say, a festival library engine, you might be able to pick up poachers with a Workshop and then upgrade them into festivals and libraries that are going to be a little bit more useful for you in those sorts of decks. Let's imagine that you are buying a load of cards at the end of your turn, and you don't have quite enough money to buy the card that you really want. Well, what you can do is you can buy a slightly cheaper one and then look to upgrade it next turn and turn it into the one that you want. Now, you might also say to yourself, well, isn't this just a little bit worse than Cantrip Coin? What if instead of upgrade I'd bought, say, a merchant or a market instead? Wouldn't I then be able to have just bought that card that I wanted directly? And yes, that's true, right? Upgrade is going to be a little bit worse than a Cantrip Coin, but this is a thing that you can do. So far, this all sounds pretty bad for Upgrade, right? All we've done is talked about how much worse this effect is compared to its peers like Remodel. And even on Remodel, it's not that good of an effect. Normally, you want to actually get the cards that you want to play, and you don't really want to be trashing them and turning them into other things. So why would we actually want Upgrade in this case? Well, Upgrade's got more stuff that it can do than just that one particular main benefit of upgrading your cards. What's really important here is that because Upgrade must gain a card that costs exactly 1 more coin, then sometimes this gives you no options at all. Sometimes there are no cards available, and therefore you don't gain anything. Now, what this means is that Upgrade is usually pretty good at trashing coppers and curses. So if you think about Remodel, you can't really use it to trash your curses or coppers very easily because you must gain a card, and there's always going to be coppers or curses available. So, I mean, I guess theoretically you could think that there is a situation where those are not available, but then estates are also going to be available as well. So you always have a card that you can pick up, and therefore you must take one. So you can't really use the Remodel very easily to trash your junk because it's so low value. All you're going to get from it is other junk. Right, you trash a curse, what you're going to turn into an estate. There's not always good things available at 2. But this isn't the case with Upgrade. Upgrade can actually effectively get rid of them as sort of the way that it asks you to gain a card costing the exact amount. While that is quite restrictive for the upgrading, it does open up this new avenue of something that Upgrade can do. So you can actually use Upgrade as a genuine, proper trasher in a way that Remodel isn't. Now, there are some exceptions to this that we do have to mention quickly. So sometimes you do get cards that cost 1. Poorhouse is the only card available that actually costs 1. And this is a card that normally when it's on the board, it's really going to hurt Upgrade to do this effect. Cost reduction can also do it. Now, usually if you're only going to be playing 1 piece of cost reduction, you just know you can play Upgrade before it or just not play it afterwards. But Canal from Renaissance is a single cost reduction that you can't turn off, and usually when it's available it might be the only cost reduction, in which case as soon as you buy Canal you've sort of stopped all of your upgrades from usefully being able to trash your coppers and curses anymore. So do be careful when these exist. This particular use for Upgrade does get quashed when you've got these usually. So there's a really important part of Upgrade that we've sort of been intentionally ignoring up until now, but it's a very key part of the card, and that is this +1 card and +1 action that's written at the top. Upgrade is a cantrip, and cantrips are usually pretty good cards in general. Now, Upgrade can be used like a Cantrip Trasher, or of course as a cantrip like Minor Remodel, and being a cantrip makes it very easy to fit in your deck and to cycle through your deck. Now, it's not the best Cantrip Trasher in the world. Like, if you think about a Cantrip Trasher like Sentry, it's able to trash 2 cards, and also those cards do not come from your hand, and so your hand hopefully is better at affording better cards during your turn, but also it has these other effects like discarding provinces off the top of your deck. Or you compare it to something like Junk Dealer from Dark Ages. This is a actual Cantrip Trasher, but it also gives you a coin. This is a lot better than Upgrade. So Upgrade's not the best Trasher in the world. It does tend to be pretty slow because it's only trashing you one card at a time. If you think about, again, Sentry or another 5-cost Trasher like, say, Trading Post, these are trashing you ideally more than one card at a time, and they get your deck under control a lot more quickly. You might be tempted with Upgrade if you're using it as your only Trasher that you need to buy multiple of them, but because this is the competitive price point of 5, this comes with a high opportunity cost, and if you're, like, say, not buying Draw because you're buying Upgrade, you'll find that it actually takes quite a long time for your deck to actually get under control and doing stuff, and all through that time you're trashing from your hand and making your turn slightly worse, and it can feel very, very slow when playing Upgrade to use it as a Trasher. So in terms of using it as a Trasher, I find that Upgrade tends to be much better when you have other trashing that you pick up earlier. So a lot of the time there's trashing available that's cheaper. So if you look at Chapel, if you look at Steward, or something like, say, Forager, these cards will let you start trashing your deck early on really quickly because they are so cheap. You can get them very early in a way that you cannot necessarily do with Upgrade. So what you can use with Upgrade is that when you've got these good early trashers, you don't necessarily, you want to be trashing your cards early, but you don't have to get super thin straight away. So what you can do is you can trash some of the worst cards early on, and then you can eventually get an Upgrade, and before your deck is totally clean, you can convert that Trasher into something better. So you can turn your Chapel into a Village or a Silver or what have you, or you try to turn your Steward into some nice 4-cost, and then you can start using the Upgrade to finish off the job. And it's going to be a lot better to finish off the job with Upgrade because it's a cantrip. So Upgrade sort of lets you start to transition your deck into something better once your deck is more prepared for it. One of the big problems with getting Upgrade early and using it as your only Trasher is that because it's trashing so slowly, it's hard to keep drawing the Upgrade every turn to play it because your deck's not super thin. But it's really nice if you can have something else start the job off for you, get your deck a bit under control, then shift over to the Upgrade and let it finish its job. So I find Upgrade as a Trasher tends to work a lot better in conjunction with some other Trasher than it does on its own. Because the coppers are bad in that you've got so many of them, but you can still play them for money during the mid-game if you've still got them around. So usually you want to start getting rid of a bunch of them, and especially the estates. But then you will sort of slow down how bad they really are for you as it becomes easier to draw your deck. And you'll still want to get rid of them, but they will still be contributing to your economy in that early stage. So far this probably all sounds pretty bad for Upgrade. I've talked about how it's a lot worse than Remodel. They're doing the remodeling type of stuff. It's a lot worse at trashing than many other cards because it's so expensive and because it's only doing one at a time. So it's not giving you these superpower specialized benefits, and it's quite expensive for a card that's worse than its peers at these things. But the big thing with Upgrade is that it can do both of these things. It's quite flexible in what it can do. And, of course, it's a cantrip, which makes it very, very easy to slot into your deck and play it. You don't need to buy a village to support it like you would with Remodel, for example. So Upgrade tends to be at its best when you're actually using it for a combination of different things. If you just want to use it to trash, then you'll find that it's going to be worse than other trashers. If you just want to use it to remodel, you will find that there may be a remodel variant that's on the board, and that's going to be way better than Upgrade at doing just that. But Upgrade is giving you this easy to slot into your deck, much more minor effects, but it's giving you a whole wide combination of them, and that's really where Upgrade's true power lies. So when we isolate its effects and talk about them like we did at the start of this video, it's going to look pretty bad for Upgrade, but you've got to realise that the whole package that you get with Upgrade as a whole is actually quite good. I was a little bit surprised, I'm going to be honest, to see that the community's latest rankings of how powerful a card is. Upgrade was in the top 20%, and that was higher than I initially had thought. But in reality, Upgrade, it's slightly misleading in some ways, that when you try and focus on certain things, it might not seem super good, when in reality, it's the whole that you've got to focus on. So that's sort of the main key point you've got to understand with Upgrade. You're not looking for a certain thing that it can do on the board. You're looking to try and make it a mixture of trashing and upgrading, usually. Like that's where you're getting the benefit from. So let's take a closer look at that. What sort of things are we looking for at Upgrade? So Upgrade, given the fact that it gains you cards that cost exactly one more, is going to be a lot better when you have cards that you want to play at consecutive price points. So even if you are, like say, you're buying cards that aren't quite as expensive as you want, and you're looking to upgrade the cards that you buy or gain into the better ones, it's still really nice to have the cards, when they're going through that transition, be cards that you want to play, because sometimes you're just going to get bad orders in your drawer, and you don't really want a card sitting around that you're not actually planning on ever playing just to upgrade it again. You sort of want every card that you're able to get to be useful to you, so that your turns don't end up accidentally dying because you've just been sitting there converting these crappy cards into more crappy cards. Right? You want stuff that you can use to take advantage of it as it shows up when you draw it. Maybe you will have to use that card to keep drawing, and you will then try to upgrade something else instead. Well, as long as all of the cards that you're gaining and playing are useful to you, you find on the whole that even though you had to pick a different target than you were planning, it's still going to be good, because all of your cards are good and you want to play them. So not having any 4-cost cards in a kingdom can be really bad for Upgrade for this reason. 4 is an important price point that the base cards do not cover. So your silvers, your duchies, your golds, 4 is missing. So you're very reliant on 4s showing up in the kingdom in order to have anything there worth playing. And sometimes you can get 4s, like let's say Moneylender, where you might start off with it, but by the time you get the upgrade, you're going to look to trash the Moneylender into a nice 5, and then start trashing your coppers with Upgrade. But then if you're going to be trying to convert like silvers into 5-cost cards, you're going to have to use something like Moneylender as a transitional phase, and at that point that card is doing nothing for you. And so not having good 4s is going to be pretty bad for Upgrade in that regard. Sometimes 4s are really nice though. So just looking in Intrigue, for example, you've got Mill, you've got Diplomat. These sorts of cards can fit in pretty well with the deck that's being upgraded by Upgrade, because those cards can be easy to play, and Diplomat likes the fact that Upgrade is reducing your hand size. So it sort of plays nicely. We can talk more about that in the Diplomat video. It's nice to have good 3-cost cards if you're planning to upgrade your estates. Now, usually estates are a pretty important target for other trashers, so if you open with Masquerade or Steward or Chapel, you may find all your estates are gone before you ever pick up an upgrade. But if it is something like Moneylender that is around, you might still have them available, and then having a good 3 to turn the estates into really helps Upgrade. Silver's not so great, and it can make Upgrade feel pretty slow because it's this stop card that's not necessarily doing that much for you by the time you've got your upgrades going. So just something like Village, even if it's just a cantrip and you don't plan to actually use it to play more actions, it's going to really help make your deck smoother and easier to run if there's a nice 3-cost card if you're going to be trashing your estates. And as the upgrade, it's usually pretty bad on what we call singleton boards. So if there's no plus buy and there's no gainers, this means you're only gaining 1 card per turn. And upgrade's not super good in those because you run out of targets pretty quickly is the main problem. It can be used as a thinner, but then you're probably only using it to thin your junk, and then you're not really, taking great advantage of the card. It can be done, but there's usually better alternatives. Of course, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes it's going to be your only thinning and you really want to thin with Upgrade, in which case it's fine. But generally, the more access you have to gaining stuff, the better you are to find good targets for your upgrade. So boards with a lot of gains, I find, tend to go quite well with upgrade, just because there's a lot of stuff that you get the opportunity to upgrade with upgrade. The more targets it has, the better, because it needs that flexibility because of the order that you draw your deck and so on. Like, you want to make sure that if you've got an upgrade, that there's always something that it can be doing for you, because it's slightly weak at the things that it's doing. To get the most out of it and to make it worth buying, you kind of want it to feel like it's doing something for you every time you draw it. You might not play it every turn, but the more turns you can play it, the better the buy would have been, the better gaining upgrade would have been for you. Having your starting estates replaced with shelters can often be quite bad. This is because usually there are not 2-cost cards that you want a lot of copies of. Now, this is not always the case. Sometimes there's encampment, sometimes there's pawn, sometimes there's page. Right, you can get pretty good 2-cost cards. But in general, 2-cost cards are pretty weak. You don't necessarily want a lot of them. There's a lot of 2-cost cards out there that you really don't want a lot of. And so shelters on the whole tends to be worse for upgrade. Although bear in mind that other trashers might have got there first, in which case it doesn't really matter. But if part of why you're assessing whether or not you want upgrade is because you want it to trash your starting cards, then bear in mind that if those starting cards are shelters instead of estates, it's going to be a little bit worse for it. Junking attacks are a good reason to add more upgrades later on. So as your deck starts to get junked up, what's nice about upgrade is that it's easy to just slot more into your deck because they're cantrips. It's easy to play them. And that'll help you get thin. And then once you have got thin, you can always turn the other upgrades into gold. Right? You can start converting either the witches, for example, or the upgrades. They can be turned into nice cards that make your deck better. So upgrade, just the fact that it's a Cantrip Trasher, even though it's not the best one in the world, if the more reasons you have to want to have a lot of trash cards, then that's going to be better for upgrade. Lastly, it's really good if you've got very effective draw, because of the way, like all of these cards like Remodel, you really want to be pairing it up with the cards that you want to trash. But it's also nice for draw to X because it lowers your hand size, because it's just a cantrip that you play it and then your hand size goes down. This makes it really easy to slot into those decks, and it means you will hopefully be drawing more. Even if you're trashing a card that you could have played and turning it into something else, like you're trashing a 3-cost into a 4-cost instead of thinning junk, the fact that you get to now draw a little bit more from your draw to X cards means that you might actually be able to have a better turn, particularly if it was some card that you didn't want to play now. Like there was some terminal in your hand, you don't have the action space to play it, you want to draw with your draw to X, then the fact that upgrade can non-terminally just get that other card out of your hand and you can draw a slightly better one later at the end of your turn, that can be really nice for those sorts of engines. There are some cards that do quite well with upgrade, and this is not an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to point them out. So Fortress, it's a 4-cost card that you effectively cannot trash. It always returns back to your hand, but you can gain quite a lot of 5-cost cards very easily when you have Fortress and Upgrade, because Upgrade is a cantrip. It now becomes a cantrip gainer of 5-cost cards anytime you combine it with Fortress. And if that's what you want, and you want a lot of 5-cost cards, then this is actually really powerful. You can get a lot of 5-cost cards very, very quickly when you have Upgrade and Fortress in combination. Rats is very similar. It trashes your junk and gives you more 4-cost cards that you want to trash. It sort of plays very similarly to Fortress, except you might run out of rats. I'd say it's not necessarily as good. However, what's nice is that because the rats are trashing the junk, you don't need to waste your time trashing the junk with the upgrades instead. So it might get online quicker, but the overall number of cards you can gain might be a little bit more limited. But rats and upgrade is usually pretty good. Grand Market is another example. So this is a 6-cost card that you often want a lot of, but it's really hard to buy, but it's a lot better if you can use gainers to gain it, and upgrades are really good at that. So you can just buy a bunch of upgrades and then upgrade them into Grand Markets, and suddenly your deck is very, very good. So Grand Market is another target that you really want to watch out for when you've got upgrade. Some final tips about this card. Do watch out if you're playing it blind, hoping to draw something worth trashing. The trashing is mandatory in upgrade. You must trash something, and if all the cards in your hand before you play it are really good, then you're always running a risk, if you play it to try and draw more, that you're going to have to trash one of those cards in your hand. Now, if you're playing the upgrade because it's the only card that draws, and say you really want to find a smithy, then when you play it, you've got to play it with the understanding that if you draw that smithy, you will still be trashing one of those cards that were originally in your hand. And maybe that's fine, but I find that any time like my turn is struggling to draw and I'm thinking about playing upgrade blind to try and draw a little bit more, I usually regret it if I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable about doing that before I play the upgrade. So, you don't have to play it. But be careful. Don't be fooled by the fact that it's a cantrip. If it's going to be bad to play it, don't play it. Now, if you've drawn your entire deck, then one thing that's nice with upgrade is that you can hit the same card multiple times per turn. So when you upgrade a card, the new card that you gain to replace it goes into your discard. So if you play a second upgrade after that, it will first draw a card, and it will be that one card in your discard, the card that you just gained. So you can trash it, and you can upgrade it again. So it's nice and easy to upgrade one card multiple times once you've drawn your deck. Bear in mind, though, that means you have to draw your deck where you can't play the upgrades until you've drawn it. So they're almost like stop cards until you finish drawing your deck. And this is why you can't necessarily support a huge number of upgrades a lot of the time. Like, you have to start trashing upgrades to upgrade, because they sort of can get in the way of drawing your deck early on if you've got them in your hand. You really want to be able to draw first and then have a bunch of upgrades. Lastly, same with remodel. Cost reduction can be beneficial. Now, it doesn't matter initially, like reducing a 3-cost card to a 2-cost card isn't going to change the target that upgrade can upgrade cards into, because both your target and the thing you're planning to get have both been reduced by the same amount. But you can't reduce cards below 0, and that means that if you play enough cost reduction, eventually trashing your coppers or any card turns into much better cards instead. So unlike remodel, where you can gain a card up to something, say you've played, for example, 5 bridges, well, with remodel you can now turn, say, a curse into any card costing up to 7, so you can, say, turn it into a gold. But with upgrade, you can't turn it into a card that now costs 0, because it has to cost exactly 1 more. So the remodel, instead of turning that curse into a gold, it could be turning it into some sort of like witch or whatever, but they both cost 0 at that point, but the upgrade can't do that. So if you want to take advantage of this cost reduction, you have to be really careful with upgrades. Sometimes you can be careful because you're playing a lot of bridges and you've drawn your deck before you start playing any, but sometimes you've got stuff like highway and you can't be as careful because you need to be playing the highways to continue to draw your deck. So if you get the opportunity, just bear in mind that you've got to be very specific with how you play cost reduction to get the most value out of upgrade and to take advantage of that cost reduction. So that's everything I have to say about upgrade. So a bit of a difficult card, this one. It does a lot, and overall the card is quite good, but because of the way each individual thing that it does not seem that strong when isolated, it can be pretty tough to understand the value of upgrade. But overall, like, when upgrade is good and you're able to use it to do a bunch of different things and you're sort of playing it most of your turns and getting this value out of it, upgrade is very strong. It's a cantrip, which is really good effect for a card to have. It makes it very easy to play and to slot into your deck. So yeah, that is upgrade. It's learning how to play with it well and assessing what sort of boards are good with it is something that will come with experience. I would say you want to just try and keep in mind that any time you can use it to do a little bit of trashing, but not all of your trashing, and also there are a bunch of cards that you might want the look of at different costs, then upgrade is actually fine, and you will want to get it. And maybe you don't get it straight away, but you will get one at some point, and it can actually be quite good because it's doing a lot for you, and it's hard on a turn-by-turn basis to understand what it's doing, but overall your deck will actually start to become really good. Like, upgrade really does improve your deck quite well if you have the ability to make a lot of use out of it. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go over to the online client, and we are going to generate some random boards with upgrade, and we'll try and assess how good it is in that particular kingdom. So what have we got here? We have upgrade is the only trashing, it looks like. Yes, it is. Upgrade is the only thinning. We have Torturer, but the only village is Nobles, which is pretty harsh. It's going to be difficult to get off a Torture Engine. We do have Labs. We have got Artisan that can draw these. We would really like to play a lot of Torturers here. I think the trashing is pretty difficult, so being able to force our opponent to gain curses is going to be quite nice, actually, if we can start getting that going sooner rather than later. We have got Lurker to gain the Nobles, and we have got Artisan to gain Laboratories and Torturers. So actually we can do a lot of gaining, but we've really got to get our deck under control as soon as possible. So actually I think we do want to focus on upgrades. If our opponent is torturing us, we can, trash the curses pretty easily because they go into our hand sometimes with the upgrade, but maybe a library might be okay, but how do you get this stuff? So the problem with this deck here is that everything's very expensive. And while there is Lurker, it's hard to actually get your deck under control. I wonder, the Cellar doesn't feel so good just because there's this potential discard attack. It's going to take a long time for your deck to be good. I'm wondering how good would just doing a Duchy Duke slog be as an alternative, just because it's so long to get your deck under control. There is no plus buy, which is also a problem. But the Torturer is just... It just feels like it's really harsh if you get off multiple Torturers. Like, no deck is really going to be able to deal with that. And the Nobles are giving you points, which is going to help the engine. If an engine can get off and the Lurker, the engine player can be gaining Nobles every turn, they actually will catch up with the Duchy Duke player, and they will be able to crush them under the weight of a load of curses if they can get off multiple. So I think you have to go for the engine, but it's going to be slow and it's going to be hard. I don't think we can start with Lurkers. I think we have to open like double silver, and if we, which is bad, but I think we have to do it. It doesn't feel great, but there's no 4 cost. We are using upgrade only to clean. There isn't any 3 or 4 cost except silver. Which is fine. You wouldn't really want to thin the silvers. You do want to keep them around anyway. So you will be getting some when you clean out your estates. And you're going to have a bunch of silvers. I guess you can trash one eventually, especially if we're opening double silver. If we open 5-2, I'm definitely getting an upgrade. I don't know if maybe I do get a Lurker with it, and I just force the other player to buy one earlier than they would like to, even if I don't actually play it. But yeah, this is just pretty expensive thinning, and it's not super great, but we've got to do it. And actually starting to draw our deck is going to be really difficult. I would really like to try and get an Artisan, but there's no good way to get one early. I think it's going to be a while before anyone can get one, unless they get super lucky. This is tough. How much do we buy upgrades over and over before we start buying our first Torturer or our first Laboratory? I don't think we can get Torturer straight away just because it's so hard to get the villages. Wow, difficult board this. I think I wonder if early on you can upgrade cards in your hand and then draw up with the library and use that as a big spike to try and get artisans and nobles. But yeah, man, I guess with artisan we just have to buy a load of labs early on to try and get our deck good enough. I think we do pick up lurkers early on, even if we're not playing them, just in the hope that we collide them, and also because there's no easy way to gain them otherwise, because they cost 2 and we've got no plus buy or gainer. We want other things with artisan. Is bandit good? It doesn't feel good on this board. I'm wondering how much it destroys a Duchy Duke strategy as another attack. Like, it might be fine to eventually get one. If we are the only player doing an engine, I can see us using a bandit. Otherwise, I might not bother, because I'm only going to buy 1 per turn and I might have like 5 silvers available eventually. So yeah, I think you have to use upgrade, and you're only using it to trash your junk, and you're pretty sad about it. And it's really slowing down how this deck kicks off. I don't think Duchy Duke can compete, because the ultimate payoff of the engine eventually is going to be really good. We're going to be drawing with labs, and then we're going to be playing nobles just to set off a load of torturers. That's really our payload of this engine. Just playing a bunch of torturers and absolutely crushing anyone who tries to do something like Duchy Duke. And then eventually we buy 1 province per turn. Yeah, so upgrade is key on this board, but it's a really sad upgrade, I think. It's a very difficult engine. Now, you can, with Lurker, you can upgrade your 5 costs and turn them into nobles, which is nice, but I think I prefer to use Lurkers. Maybe you only need 1 Lurker in that case. You can use the upgrade and then just reclaim what you want. Maybe that's good. Oh, I didn't mean to start this game. Never mind. So what do we have here? So again, we're missing a 3 cost. So, but there is always silver. Is upgrade the only trashing? Again, it is. Now we have ironworks to gain mills, which is nice. There's no village, is there? No, there's not. There's no village on this board. There is thinning with upgrade, and you would turn that into a minion stack. As far as non-terminals go, this is non-terminal, this is non-terminal, this is non-terminal, and this, and this. So we do have like minion, pawn, and mill. You can get quite a good engine going with these. The terminal that we would want to play, could you make use of Baron? Maybe we just don't have a terminal. Maybe eventually one of our pawns is terminal or something. I think that's going to be the best thing to do. We do want a minion stack. We are going to start off with an ironworks, even though it struggles to hit 5, just because gaining the mills is really good here. I don't think you bother with a Baron in that case. I would open silver and ironworks. I'm going to want to get upgrades first, but I will... Do I get 2 upgrades and then I start buying minions? Or do I get 1 upgrade and I start getting minions and I cycle just that 1 upgrade a lot more quickly? Do I eventually have some use? Can I rely on upgrade to do anything other than just holding my nose and using it for trashing? You can eventually turn your silvers into ironworks that you may be able to upgrade into other things. One of the big problems is that minion doesn't have a very big hand size, so you're going to have a bunch of these upgrades that are going to struggle to find the ideal card. So I think we use it for trashing. Maybe we eventually turn an upgrade into a harem just because it's points, and we have 2 upgrades and we turn one of them into harem, I think it is, isn't it? I've forgotten the pronunciation. Because you're not really going to be making much use of gold in this deck. All of our coins are going to come from action cards, and we may not actually have a gold in our hand when we finish drawing our deck. So I think we can do that. Again, I think this is a board where it's important to upgrade to get it, but you're only using it for the trashing, and you're only sort of getting it because you have to, and it's just really slow, and it hurts the engine, the fact that it's slow trashing, but that's what we're doing. So some sad boards for upgrade, but we're still getting it so far. What have we got here? Well, straight away, we've got a lot of really good trashers is the first thing I noticed. We've got Chapel, we've got Sentry, There's even trading post. So we can get thin pretty quick. Now, there's no village. And you've got smithy, and you've got replace, and you've got baron. But what is even your draw? Well, there's wishing well. You can open chapel and wishing well, I guess, and you can start hoping to try and get some sort of wishing well draw engine going. But there aren't really 4-cost cards that we will play. What's our ultimate payload? Is it going to be replace? Is it going to be baron? Like, what's the terminal that we're going to want to play? Or is it even just trading post combined with chapel? I don't really like trading post. The thing is that you can start off with chapel. You can get an upgrade. You can eventually turn the chapel into a silver. But are we going to be doing much other upgrading in our deck? Not really, unfortunately. So maybe we just don't bother with upgrade here. I think our ultimate deck is going to look like... Do we even bother with the chapel at all? I'm just wondering, like, what actually is... What are we doing once we actually trash our deck? Like, this board is incredibly weak because there's nothing to do. I don't like Baron and Estate because it makes it harder to play your Wishing Wells, which is like the only thing that's going on this board. Is the only card that you want a bunch of once you've thinned down. Now, there is replace to mill provinces and also curse your opponent. Actually, that's pretty decent. If your opponent's using chapel, maybe you have a sentry even after you've chapeled, just in case you have an opponent that's trying to do replace tricks so you can more easily trash the curses. But I think that that's actually what we end up doing. We play chapel, we trash down, we get some Wishing Wells to draw, we have a sentry, we have a replace. We're going to look to just have enough money to buy 1 province per turn, and we are going to hopefully try and replace something just to curse our opponents, because it will be quite nasty on this board because the drawing is so limited. But you have a sentry to defend against that. But otherwise, I don't really know what you're doing here. You could buy a bunch of upgrades and turn them into golds, but so what, right? Like, and you end up with this upgrade that you're not playing. I guess you could eventually replace. You know what? Maybe we can make use of upgrade. Maybe we chapel down, we draw up, we get an upgrade, we turn the chapel into like another Wishing Well or a silver, and then we eventually like replace the upgrade into a gold, and then we can replace the gold into a province or something. Like we have the option to do this. You might be able to fit upgrade into this deck for a limited time, and you might be able to use it to thin the remainder of your junk after chapel. So I think upgrade can be good here. There's not really many 5-cost cards that I actually want many of, so I can see me just slotting in an upgrade at some point actually. So I think it's okay on this board. I think you could skip it, but I think that actually you might get enough value out of it for a limited time, and you can eventually get rid of it for something else. So here we have chapel again and upgrade. These are our 2 trashing. Is this another board without a village? It really is. So we've got bridge, but we're not using it. But we do have mills combined with conspirator to get up to 8 pretty quickly, and we've got ironworks to help us do that. So I think we open chapel and ironworks. We're going to gain a bunch of mills, we're going to gain a bunch of conspirators, we're going to kick off a deck that tries to draw conspirators, and it also has these mills that it can use for a little bit of extra coin if we draw a load of like victory cards instead. And I think that's what we're doing. Do we end up with a bridge play? I'm not sure that we do. I don't think we particularly care about any of these. I don't think we need to gardens because I think we can province quickly enough. It looks like we're doing thinning with chapel, ironworks, mill, conspirator. There is nothing that we want to cycle through with upgrade. We're very strictly relying on having a lot of 4-cost cards, and we're not planning on getting very many 3s. I mean, you could... I don't think we're ever going to bother with getting a silver. We're just going to be trying to play this ironworks to get a lot of these. We might even add a second ironworks, get a lot of these, and then the chapel is still around to trash one of the ironworks if it's getting in the way. So I think we never buy upgrade here. Every card that we want costs exactly the same amount, and there's really good trashing, and so it just doesn't have any use. So yeah, so no upgrade on this board. It's a very unusual board given that everything like costs 4 there that you want. So here's the last kingdom. So another chapel kingdom. We do have a village at last. So we got Shantytown. We got 2 victory cards. This is So, okay, let's say we chapel down. What are we doing? We only have Merchant and Wishing Well and Baron, and that's it to play. So, funnily, we have Shantytown, but the only terminals are Trading Post and Baron and Chapel. Like, oh, this is terrible. This isn't what you want to see for a village at all. Like, what a bunch of weird boards that we've seen, rather. So hard to not justify Chapel when it shows up and do something else. Is Duchy Duke good enough here? Because we're really not doing anything. Right, this is the key thing with this board. We can't gain a lot of merchants. We can probably early on chapel down to Baron and Estate, and we can gain a bunch of merchants. We can probably do that. But I really don't like... We're never going to get Shantytown because we're okay only playing one terminal. I do like trying to get some Wishing Wells if we can get a lot of these cards, but I don't know how effectively we can get a lot of these cards. There isn't a good way to do it, and I'm not convinced that playing Baron and getting the extra buy is going to be good enough. I think this might actually be a Duchy Duke board that can transition into Gardens for even more points if it needs to, really late. I think we are just going to open... We're actually going to skip Chapel. We're going to open Silver. I think we might even be able to get away with a Shantytown just to use it as like a laboratory. And we actually don't care that it's a village. It's just that it draws us 2 cards because we've got hardly any action cards. Is Duchy Duke really good in the absence of buying any sort of action card that might help? I don't like Wishing Well in a Duchy Duke deck. Maybe we have so many silvers that we could eventually start picking up merchants, but I don't like that. I think I'd rather have the silver. I don't see any use for upgrade in either deck. Whether we go for the engine that does merchants and Wishing Wells to just try and get up to province, or whether we're going for Duchy Duke, I don't see the value in upgrade. I think Duchy Duke might win out on this board. You can get a lot of points, and the fact that there are the Gardens is nice. And the person going for all the merchants and the Wishing Wells after trashing down, they're not really going to want to upgrade into Gardens. I was just wondering if that was a thing that they could do late. And yeah, maybe it is, but it doesn't feel very good. I mean, playing... You can only ever play one Baron, so you can never get multiple of these. You can generate a lot of money. I don't think it's viable to generate enough money to start double provincing, because at some point you're better off using one of your buys on another province, and then it slows down the rate at which you improve your deck. But you can get... no, you can't. There's not enough merchants to start getting. I was just wondering if you could actually go all the way up to double province, but that needs 16 money, and even if you're playing a Baron, like, it's so many merchants that you need. I can't see you doing it. So you have to just focus on single province, and I don't think using a Baron to gain multiple of these is... It's going to struggle. If it has to get all of the provinces, it's really going to struggle against a Duchy Duke that transitions into also picking up Gardens. So yeah, I think this is the winning strategy. I think you have to Duchy Duke on this board. And for that reason, you're going to do that by just gaining a whole bunch of silvers, and you might be able to get some shanty towns as well, just to try and use them as cheap labs. But you're only really planning to play one per turn. It's just might be better than silver at some point. And I don't think you bother with upgrade. So I think I think upgrade is not used on this board. Okay, well, thank you for watching. I hope this was useful for you. Upgrade got a lot of use here as the only trasher in some cases, but there were opportunities to use its partial remodeling effect. It is difficult to assess this card, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised if you try and use it just as supplementary trashing, and there are cards you want at the various costs. I think if you're not sure about upgrade, you should just get one anyway, and you may find that actually it was a little bit more useful than you thought. Like this is so hard to assess, this upgrading bit of it, but it does have real value. It can be very good for you. You just sort of have to hold your nose and buy it and try it out. And because it's so difficult to see what it's actually doing for you on your turns, and you may find that your deck actually starts working really, really well, and you actually, over time, the value of upgrading your card starts to really pay off. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.